What would I do if I was a thermostat? I'd probably pick some of the grass up and then throw it in the river. Well, according to a recent study, grass actually grows backwards, so it transmits a significant portion of its weight over to the earth, and that's what moves the earth into the axis of justice, or axis of evil rather, and a permanent dissolution of a extraordinary and exorbitant amount of flame throwing might result in a deterioration of a once considered a purposefully built atomic bomb now is a wasteland filled with epic proportions of Trident transpondent Trinity College sort of come on buddy, come on, you can make it, you can do it, come on, you can do it, there you go, come on, yeah, there we go. So now we got two of us here, two of us cats, so we're gonna talk about some privacy situations going on in the fifth world, actually on the seventh layer. So the fifth level talked to the seventh layer, and they communicated, and they determined a monetizable amount of particles that accelerate, and they accelerate once they could specify, right? They could specify a originity, or you know why whiskers is actually, that's how the Irish and English say whiskers. So true definition of the word jealousy is a solutionable purpose if there is a deterrent of the detergent. You can only deter detergents if one of them was actually a tornadoable flower pot. So the hose is something of a millimeter sizable adjustability, and an adjustability of a contort, or rather a torte, or a tortillo. If you are from the Netherlands, you call it a tortillo. Obviously, if the Dutch were real Dutch people, then they would know that Belgium is actually one of the most significant Belgiums of Belgium. And so a waffle is actually quite edible these days, right? Waffles are delicious, chicken is great, some beef, bacon. Actually, you know what's crazy about you? In some countries, they eat guys like you. Not in this one though, thankfully. Well, you never know once they start bringing a different breed of whatever you can call them, stout. A stout is a beer that originally came from Scotland, and Scotland is a continent. Actually, they bullshit around with this sort of thing. See, they try to believe their own shit, but then reality kicks in, and reality says that Scotland is a part of the Atlantic Ocean islands, and the Atlantic Ocean is a part of the Pacific Ocean. They share, you know. They share. You gotta share, right? Otherwise, some of these oceans are just a little too egoistical, I tell you. One of them started a really big issue once. And so we had to nuke it, you know, had to nuke some of these oceans. They get a little too big sometimes, I think, and so That's where the canyons came from. The canyons exorbitantly came from a mass sort of immigration event of a land mass that was pushed into a cave that then turned into the solar system. And the solar system was designed specifically for one reason: to solarize and to solidify a Earth type of planet that we might one day inhabit. But until then, until we find a livable planet on, we will have to bullshit ourselves into basically a violent reaction to a specifically pushed or specifically magnetized. Never in the history of this whore have we been living in a time where time is this livable in. And I would argue for my doctorate and my ADHD or PhD rather, I don't know if it's PhD or ADHD or DHL or NDS or DPD, or they're pretty much all the same function. And the delivery of the galaxy was something truly never before seen before. Even for the universe itself, it had never seen this kind of an output of planetary resource distribution. And so I think one of the ultimate goals for everybody's old year resolution, not the new year, not the first year of the month, not the first month of the seconds, we developed a capability as a species to not need to be a species anymore. So we transformed ourselves into rocket science. So the rockets now go on their own, and Elon Musk is one of those rockets. So he shoots himself into space, then he comes back, and what we have is his stories of historical accuracy. None of this bullshit you read in the school books. That kind of stuff is actually all been written by Elon Musk. And he won't tell any of us, you know. Why would he? If I was him, I would just take the money and run to his original planet where he comes from. Not this one. He is of a different sort of environment. And I think we can all agree that a specific environment from which he originates from is substantially more significantly improvisably improved compared to all cookware should be plastic. Maintaining plastic on this earth is the easiest job that human beings have ever integrated into the surplexity, or rather the supplementation of our species. We're actually, where the word species comes from is from spacey, and Kevin Spacey was the one who originally came up with it, but I think we can take that off him now. And Glenn Ross.
How did you know that?
How did you know that? That I left them on my desk. How did you know that? What's funny about the universe is that the World Cup is actually being played on a global scale. So there's not really a World Cup going on. It's a universal cup, meaning that all the planets are like pinballs or balls in the court, and they struggle for the confiance or the contingency rather of the space continuum time where they fight with each other, and they push and pull each other forward and backwards, or backwards and forwards, rather, or rather. Trickle-down economics usually generate a substantial amount of wealth for me, and only me. So if I wasn't a billionaire, I would be a trillionaire, and if I wasn't a trillionaire, I would be working in construction most likely, because I like building things. So I'd probably take my millions and billions. I would make bricks out of the cash money, put it in cement, so that I would actually make money out of the cement, and I would cement the money into the brick type of carrot formation, and I would then make buildings out of my money, so that when a asteroid strikes, I am unaffected, because money would protect me from the outside elements. So there's no real solution to pollution unless you collide a particle accelerator into another particle accelerator. So there's a particularity that happens where if a black hole swallows two particle accelerators, it becomes a nuclear fission.
And Tyrannosaurus Rex is really a Neanderthal.
That's what we used to look like back before genetic modification obviously kicked in and steroids became an everyday thing. So before we were dinosaurs, we used to be humans again. But then the steroids kicked in and we grew big tails and fins and stuff. So we became human again just because it was kind of uncomfortable with this kind of gravity. It's quite difficult to maintain a low gravitational output force. In this systematic sepsis, there is a arterial Arthur who, in medieval days, he would be considered one of the greatest Arthurs. In this Arthurishness, there's a sword that he perpetrated, and he polarized it. And everybody copied his methods after that. They were installing one of the swords into the rectum of the enemies, and what they would do with the enemies afterwards would be they would nuclearize them and make them into nuclear weapons that then they put on the tips of the swords, and then they would shoot people into other people, therefore neutralizing or never-endingly perspiratizing per capita. Per capita used to mean something completely different. They changed the definition of it, obviously, as they do. So they flew with that one. So we stuck with it. I guess we had to stick with it because the governments came in and started controlling vocabularial, mesmerizing, sort of, hypnotizing, sort of. And we had to believe that once there was a nominal decimal, but then the aliens decided that nuclear bombs are gonna be their source of entertainment. So they gave us that technology, and from that technology we grew up into possibly one of the worst species amongst the human combatant race. So we started fighting back, and once we started fighting back, they realized that we are actually not something to mess with. And you might believe it, you might think it's absolute bedoodle, but Lionel Messi and Lionel Richie are two of the same people. They just change from you will never see them in the same place at the same time. That's why they look so similar. And Cristiano Ronaldo and Pablo Escobar are distant cousins. Ronaldo is actually a front for fentanyl and cocaine crack trafficking. That's why he always has this. He has this psychotic smile about him. He's high all the time. He's completely coked out of his guilt. And Leonardo da Vinci was actually a reptile. Back in the reptilian era, he was one of the first ones that we synthesized into a reptile. Before him, we had a lot of really mismanaged mistakes that we had. And he was a test bunny. But he was strong. I remember that one instance where we took him and we put him into a cage with other reptiles. So we couldn't. Well, we made a lot of mistakes that day, but we couldn't separate him afterwards. Like we put him in there, and then we didn't know which one was he, which one did he become afterwards. We should have tagged him, but we didn't, and we just let him go free afterwards. We forgot all about him. We just forgot all about him. Well, fuck him. We had other ones that we took. Giovanni Pavarotti, he was a Spanish landlord. He used to rent out homes for really exorbitant prices. Nobody could keep up with him. He was one of the best of real estate businesses that the Senegalese and the Venezuelans used to. They had posters of him even, because he used to sell ice cream too on the side. But then everybody found out that was Cristiano's front. They would put cocaine in the waffles, and then kids used to get high off it, and they didn't know what it was. So they were getting educated, but then Giovanni decided that it's time to stop. We gotta get these cocaine waffles out and replace them with pure, unadulterated, unfiltered fentanyl. So then the fentanyl came in. And once fentanyl kicked in, that was one of the most impressive, honestly, one of the most impressive psyops in reptile history, because you couldn't compete with the reptiles. Even some of the kangaroos tried to get in on the action, but they failed miserably. But they transferred a lot of the wealth of knowledge and information that they learned from the reptiles rather. So the kangaroos instilled a completely separate entity into it. They realized that, wait a minute, waffles and kids, they eat the kids. So once you would have a kid, you would be completely lost in translation or transmission, or Transylvania, where originally Dracula was actually Cristiano's stepbrother, who was one of the, for a worse word, he wasn't actually a football player. He was also a front to the Colombian waffle vendors. So if you bought ice cream in Colombia or Cuba in the 1965 mid-era of summer period, especially from the month of June up until the month of July, middle somewhere, chances are the dishwasher that you used was full of kids' bloods. So, but the kids' bloods was actually a rap group in the Paraguayan government, and the Paraguayan government was one of the most notoriously vicious when it came to kid distribution. And once they distributed, they became so unbelievably wealthy that they had no choice but to travel back into the ocean where they originally originated from. So there's a lot of ocean stories about the Cubans, and there's a lot of Italian words for them. But the Italians then started to separate their country into worlds rather than planets, we started to experiment on detergents. So what you would have is a political movement that involved a laundering scheme where the actual washing fluid was not the same quality as it was before. Obviously, kids don't really make a great washing fluid, but they were attempting to. They attempted it. They attempted it. It's raining, buddy. It's raining, buddy. We gotta. Well, actually, it's kind of worse for you because you got a heavy coat on. As far as the floor is concerned, a concealed weapon is only as strong as a bullet itself. So permanent Assange, a permanent Snowden is from many moons ago, instrumentally a significantly sort of a clockworky sort of a thing. And orangely, it shines on above. It shines on above. It doesn't syrup itself into a foil. So if syrup was actually in a tea bag, then well, you couldn't properly open a shelf unless it was a lifelong sort of boxy, sort of black plasticky sort of a thing. And then we could play some games, but really we tried not to intervene into any kind of religious cult-like following, because there's no sea where there is water. You see, you can only get water from the ocean. That's what the Russians did back in the 1700s, is that they would take water from the ocean and move it into a man-made manufacturing plant where they would make a substantial portion of their profit came from believing in that they could take a significant amount of water from the ocean and move it into a door handle. They could have handled it better, I believe so, but then Chernobyl happened in 1854, I think, or 56, and they then really panicked. They started going into an unknowable. Actual oxygen was temporarily dismantled by a corruption that occurred in the 1760s. So that's when LSD was invented by a Siberian husky who it would temporarily allow a synthesizing of the creedable, and then apples were invented by the Spanish.
With the Spanish charade, they used to call it back in the 1500s. So
they spread out a misinformation campaign.
The Siberian husky was actually invented by the LSD, and the LSD came straight out. It didn't have the luxury that we now have, of being multiplied in a Thai format. So the crown that they used to wear back in the 1700s
was a red rose,
but they carried it from itself
downwards or upwardly, struck up.
Or it's a natural sort of stringent that pulls the flames out of the contortant. So the contortant is one of the rarest elements on this planet. But we created a natural diversion hole.
Even two people could fly an airplane.
And airplanes were not even invented about they knew that
From a source of titanium that was enriched by urine.
and urine was enriched from the
Waffles that Cristiano Ronaldo used to sell to the Colombian
poor kids and the poverty of a generation, even though it was predominantly a colored species. It became its own sort of intricate
introversion, primarily sourced from the mountains of Himalaya, because that's where the
Colombians actually lived before the Inca, and the Inca built some monuments that they've been built on top of, so that people would be able to recognize
where they left off at and what happened with Burr, so that you could see that where we didn't put those there, somebody else did. And I have a really boring theory about it. None of that stuff was actually built by humans. We as humans were actually placed here. And this is a reminder that this is a life form of its own regard.
this is life form of its own. This is a life form of its
There was a Russian corporation back in the 7s, and once the corporal they miscalculated the approach of the anti-terrestrial rather. So they have a testosterone. They have an extraterrestrial testosterone management system where they starve out the potion of only the peoples, well, not rather the peoples, that when death can wait, whereas they it's not solidly identifiable anyway. Identification period process takes about 7 to 8 centuries rather. I think, centuries would be a harsh sort of statement. I would say that the isotope that got spread out from the integral valuation, the evaluation of the testing period, the testing pool, they put it in a pool and then they tested it. And so once the testing was complete, they tried to manufacture a vanilla type of deal. And once the vanilla type of deal was good, I don't even think that they even knew what they were thinking about. So they restarted the whole process. And the whole process, restartation, was an integral part of what's the right word for it? An insulation material that cemented itself as one of the primary targets for instigation processes that instigated themselves into trimming a trimmable sort of flower pot, which actually mathematically, once you scanned it, you realized it was impossible to be done by hand. So they used some very powerful schmeppens. That's the actual word for weapons. They bullshit us in school, say that. No, that's not how we say it. No, it's actually schmeppens. Every word in reality, every word in reality has a schm in front of it. So this is a schmabel, that is the schmlor, that is a schmarden, this is a schmicrophone, and I am a A significant amount of this proportionally contextualizes itself in a context that predetermines its proditional. So the proditional of the chronometalomy inc as well as the Schnenemetalomy Knimfatanafatolum was so. But cinema simple as a papa say by Simon Bodavasu. Shanamalai Boshi to Banana Simana Boda. For us today. It is smoked at the Palama. Eshamatala for Panamana. And the Panama Canal is rooted into a canonical, sort of a canonical. And as far as significance goes, I am actually the real Mark Wahlberg. That guy's taking my place. Don't believe him. Don't listen to him. Well, next time you see me in his movie, that is me. Alright? That is me. Das ist mich.
Das ist